Have you ever tried to learn something new with brain fog? 6 months ago, I set myself a seemingly impossible challenge: mastering complex biochemistry to pass an exam with menopausal brain fog at 50. Why? Because like a lot of midlife women, I wanted to expand my skill set and grow my business, specifically by becoming a registered nutritionist. To do this, I need to pass every module of my master's degree with 50%. So mess up this exam and I mess up my new career. Let me take you through the challenges I faced along the way, exactly what I did to overcome them, and some actionable top tips using the handy acronym PLANS. And of course, the all-important result. I'll put timestamps for each section in the description. Now, this exam was going to be tough. Because my first degree was in medicine and psychology, I needed to sit a module called Fundamentals of Nutrition. And let me tell you, there ain't no fun in fundamentals. Just a load of complex biochemistry and energetics calculations. And that, by the way, is vitamin A. I started my course mid-September 2024 and the exam was scheduled for mid-January 2025, so this was a 4-month challenge. My first issue was time management. So although I'm a part-time student, I was doing 2 pretty sizable modules and having to combine this with my business. I'm a health coach. And I also wanted to squeeze in a holiday in November to Miami for my 50th birthday. Now, before I go into how I solved this, let's just rewind and refresh our memories as to what brain fog is. There's not a formal medical definition, but it describes a range of symptoms, including slow thinking, mental fatigue, forgetfulness, and poor concentration. The best analogy is that fuzzy-headed feeling you get when you're sleep deprived. So it's wandering attention, it's forgetting words mid-sentence, and your brain feeling like it's wading through treacle when you're trying to remember something. Causes include menopause, autoimmune diseases, long COVID, ME, and chronic fatigue. Back in my early 20s, I was really smart, so I got my medical degree at Cambridge University, and I realised that is a massive flex, but I'm using it to illustrate a point. These days, I lose my car keys or my cash card on a pretty much weekly basis and regularly walk into a room and forget why I've gone in there. It's immensely frustrating, and it soon became clear that if I want to pass this exam, it was going to take a lot longer for the information to stick than it did when I was younger. My solution was planning. Now, I'm quite old-fashioned and use a paper planner rather than a digital organiser, and I would use it to schedule my week. I'd list what I needed to achieve each week and then timetable blocks of time to go through my lecture notes and any additional information. Now, I know if I leave everything till the last minute, I get stressed. So I wanted to avoid that because stress makes brain fog worse. This meant being organised from week 1 onwards so I could schedule in that holiday so I was able to relax and enjoy myself. And yes, health coaches do drink cocktails and eat pancakes as big as a baby's head. Well, I do anyway. And I did do a tiny bit of revision by the pool, but just a tiny bit. This highlights one of the midlife superpowers I outlined in part 1 of this University at 50 series. Age and experience teach us to prioritise. And my actionable planning tip is to go through your diary on a Sunday night for the week ahead and schedule your work. The next massive challenge came in December when we lost our beloved dog Lola during emergency surgery. She was 11 and we'd noticed that she seemed more tired and was sleeping more than usual. And this video was taken 5 days before she died, and she was the most beautiful dog. And she then got very sick very quickly, and it turned out she had cancer everywhere, and the vets were brilliant, but there was nothing that could be done. It broke my heart into a million tiny pieces, and I lost pretty much a full 2 weeks, either driving back and forth from the specialist vet hospital or an intense period of grieving, and I can now talk about it without crying. The solution was to show myself some serious self-compassion, give myself space to grieve and look after my mental and physical health. Which brings us to the importance of overall well-being in dealing with both pet grief and brain fog. Firstly, sleep. So poor sleep makes everything worse. During the day, we get a buildup of a product of metabolism in our brain called adenosine. And this is what gives us that heavy-headed feeling towards the end of the day that makes us want to sleep. And that's called sleep drive. During the night, the adenosine is recycled, so we start a new day fresh, which is why getting 7 to 9, well, everybody varies slightly, hours of sleep is vital. Now, the best way of doing this is to establish something called a sleep routine, so a period of winding down prior to bed. Avoid eating too late, as that will affect sleep, and try to stop work at least a couple of hours before to give your brain some much needed chill out time. And it's ideal to try and avoid screens, including your phone, for the hour before bed. Alcohol and caffeine both negatively impact sleep, and caffeine has got a really long half-life, which means it can hang around in our system for quite some time, so I switched to decaf after lunch. My actionable sleep tip is to try and go to bed at the same time every night to help you establish a routine. If these brain fog strategies are helping you, I'd be really grateful if you could give this video the thumbs up, and even more grateful if you could subscribe and turn on notifications for more evidence-based health hacks from someone who's been there. Apart from the feelings of loss, one of the hardest things to get used to was adjusting my day now I no longer had to do a dog walk, and this impacted on my daily movement too. Physical activity is also a critical factor in reducing the impact of brain fog. Activity increases the release of something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which encourages nerve and synapse growth, and it's important in memory, so try to move daily in some form. It took me a while to get back to my daily walks and get over the fact that it was just me rather than me and Lola, and I found that listening to a podcast or an audio book helped, although sometimes I did just like to listen to the sounds of nature. A study from Exeter University here in the UK found that spending 120 minutes in nature each week improved overall health and well-being. Nature is also very good at reducing stress levels, another important factor in brain fog. Being stressed reduces your concentration further. My actionable activity tip is to end your working day by closing down your computer and going for a short walk. It will allow you to clear your head and enjoy your evening. Self-compassion also extends to learning. It's okay for things to take longer to pick up. We had a protein quality workshop, which is essentially a lot of calculations. And the young uns on my course, oh yes, they turned up with their laptops and their Excel spreadsheets. And there was me with my scientific calculator from 1989 when I did my GCSEs, and it still works. I mean, talk about build quality. And I also have my pencil case with some pens in it. I had to ask the lecturer for help at one point because I just wasn't getting it, and that made me quite stressed. But all I needed to do was to just go home and go through it all again in my own time until it made sense. And eventually it did make sense. The next challenge was Christmas. We were hosting family and we'd done no preparation and no shopping. The solution was twofold. Firstly, communication. So we spoke to our family and said, look, we don't want anything or need anything this year. Is there any chance we can just skip the gifts and just get together and concentrate on having a nice time instead? And everyone agreed. So a few small stocking fillers were purchased and a turkey hastily ordered, and it was great and everyone enjoyed themselves. And secondly, concentrate on good, nourishing food, nothing fancy. My nutrition philosophy as a health coach is that there is no such thing as good foods or bad foods. There's a place for everything. And yes, that does include pizza. There's a sweet spot between the foods which are good for your body and the foods you enjoy eating. And one of my mechanisms for getting there is to make more nutritious versions of favourites without sacrificing taste or joy. So what does the science say about food which supports brain function? Well, there's evidence for both the Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet, and the DASH diet is used to treat high blood pressure. And the two have been combined into something called the MIND diet, which stands for Mediterranean and DASH Intervention for Neurodegenerative Delay. Catchy, isn't it? Researchers followed a group of adults for 10 years and they scored their diet and gave it a mind score, so how well it aligned to the mind diet. And the higher the score, the slower the rate of decline in brain function. And they recommend eating whole grains, a wide variety of vegetables, including leafy greens, nuts, olive oil, beans and fish. They advise reducing foods which contain a large amount of saturated or trans fats, including processed foods, cakes and pastries, red meat, cheese and butter, and avoiding sugary drinks and alcohol. But as this was an observational study, we can't say that the diet caused the reduction in the decline in brain function, just that the two were associated. By the way, if you want to learn all about the different types of scientific evidence, I've made a dedicated video on it and I'll put a link in the description below. There's also a lot of evidence for the role of omega-3 in brain health. Now, omega-3 is an essential fatty acid, which means we have to get it from food. We can't make it ourselves. And there's three types: EPA, DHA and ALA. And one of the best sources is oily fish, so mackerel, sardines and salmon, particularly wild salmon. This all pretty much sums up my personal way of eating. I eat a Mediterranean diet and my actionable nutrition tip is to eat 2 portions of fish a week. In the interests of balance, there's also some evidence for the role of the ketogenic diet in preserving brain function. So throughout the last 6 months, I've really drilled down into making sure I'm eating well while studying, and that included over Christmas. Rather than a traditional Christmas cake, we had an orange, pistachio and olive oil cake. And over the holiday period, I made jewelled chocolate squares made with dark chocolate, studded with nuts and seeds, and a really good chocolate and cherry tart made with tofu. Honestly, don't knock it until you've tried it. You would never guess there's tofu in it, and it's seriously chocolatey. In the description below, I'll put a link to a recipe booklet on my website on the resources page. It's called Christmas Recipes, and you'll find the tart recipe in there as well as the cake recipe. I also made sure I ate really well on my university days by having a good filling breakfast with some protein to keep me going through the morning and a nutritious lunch. I was also very careful to make sure I was keeping well hydrated by topping up my water bottle regularly, because dehydration makes a fuzzy brain feel even worse. Unfortunately, I did have to sacrifice a lot of fun time over the Christmas holiday period. I also had a big systematic review to write for my other module, and this took longer than I anticipated. My eye condition means I can only use a laptop or computer for a couple of hours a day, and I worked my arse off to get it done by Christmas Day, but time was rapidly running out. My exam was on the 16th of January and I had lost weeks due to Christmas, pet grief and that assignment, and I was starting to get really quite stressed. It felt like thoughts were kind of flitting around in my head and then drifting off into the ether like pretty butterflies. Nothing felt like it was sticking. I'm a really visual learner to the point of remembering where the pertinent fact is on the page. And the irony of being a visual learner with crap eyes is not lost on me. Therefore, I know from all of those previous exams I've sat as a doctor that I learn best from making notes. Now, I had been making handwritten notes from my lecture materials all through the autumn term before the proverbial hit the fan in December. I set myself a 2-week timetable for January and used those notes to make some revision cards and then just kept reading them. Psychology experiments tell us this is how we learn best. So taking a topic and breaking it down into bite-sized chunks or cards and repetition. And that's my actionable learning tip. Read, read and reread your notes until exam day. And then it was time. So I made sure I had an early night, went for a morning walk and then went up to the campus for my afternoon exam. And then waited 4 long weeks. And finally, the results were published. So did I pass? I was honestly prepared for the worst. But to my surprise, I didn't just pass, I passed well and better than anticipated. So my overall module mark was 82%, which is a distinction, and the exam made up most of that. I am absolutely delighted. I've obviously got the result I needed, but I've also proven to myself that it doesn't matter if my brain is slower than it was when I was younger. I've still got it, and that has increased my confidence. I can study at 50 because I can harness the wisdom gained from age to utilise planning, organisation, and the concept of delayed gratification. I'm not going to lie, it took a lot of work, and I acknowledge that I am in the privileged position of having a part-time job and no kids. But then again, a master's degree level exam is a pretty extreme example. With adaptation and repetition, midlife learners can triumph. So if you're in midlife and struggling to learn something new, be it a degree, a language, a hobby, or even picking up a book again, know this: it's not your age. You can conquer brain fog. Give my PLANS acronym a try. Planning, learning style, whatever works for you, activity, nutrition, and sleep. Let me know what resonates most with you in the comments below. And if you want to know all about what it's like going back to university at 50, I'll leave the video for part 1 of this series here, and I'll see you in the next one.